All right, Naomi, am I good to go?
Good to go.
Okay. So we're continuing on with our series, Joshua, Portrait of a Winner. And as we reflect on some of the snapshots that we've looked at today will be our eighth one. We looked at winners catch God's vision, winners obey God's instructions, winners create partnerships to advance God's purpose. Winners sanctify themselves for the challenges before them. Winners testify to the workings of the Lord. Winners have divine encounters with God, and winners walk in victory over the enemy. And as I repeat week after week, we're not talking about winning in a game, but we're talking about winning in life. That we all deal with stuff. We deal with doctor's appointments, we deal with sickness, we deal with financial challenges, we deal with broken down appliances, we deal with rebellion in our family, and how we process that and how we deal with it determines whether we are winning. And so we've been going through these things to help us to be winners in life as we deal with these different things. Today, I'm going to touch on something that is very important to me, something that I struggle with. And even today, I just been struggling with a couple things, and I needed to hear this message. So I'm really going to be listening to this message as I teach it because I need it. And the message that we have today is winners respond to failure God's way. We look at the fact of life, and it is a fact that we are going to fail. And when we fail, we need to respond in such a way that God is glorified. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do you respond God's way when you fail? And so in our introduction, we said failure is one of life's greatest teachers. Every believer experiences it. Every family encounters it. Every church faces it. If you stand and try to tell me you got a perfect life, uh, not buying it. If you trying to tell me you got a perfect family, not buying it. If you try to tell me you belong to a perfect church, not buying it unless you're a member of Bethany. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Uh, so we face failure on a regular basis. So the question is not if we are going to fail. You're going to get that diagnosis where you begin to get anxious and worried or discouraged. Something is going to happen that throws you off your game. And so it's not a question of if we will fail, but how we respond when failure comes. Think about that. How we respond when failure comes. In Joshua chapter 7, we see one of Israel's that it follows one of Israel's greatest victories when the walls of Jericho came crashing down. What a powerful testimony to faith and God that we saw last week when the walls came down. And so chapter 7 follows on the heels of that. And wouldn't you understand that on the heels of victory comes challenges, and even as we're going to see, comes failure. We see that after the defeat of Jericho, that Joshua and the Israelites came up against a small city, a small town called Ai, and they were defeated, and 36 men were killed. And the Bible says that they lost their heart, they lost their courage. So we are reminded as we delve into chapter 7 that winners are not people who never fail, but they are people who respond to failure God's way. So we're going to jump into the lesson today. And the first thing that we want to say is that winners identify the cause of failure. Wow. Wow. When you fail, do you identify the cause? Notice God, he doesn't open up chapter 7 with a lot of introduction. He goes right to the point. He goes right to the point that Israel failed. Notice what it says in chapter 7 and verse 1. But the children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing, for Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took of the accursed thing, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel. So he goes right to the point. Before he even deals with the defeat, he reveals the cause. Although the nation had just experienced a miraculous victory, one man named Achan deliberately violated God's command by taking items that should have been dedicated to destruction. Now, you know me. Throughout this series, I've been trying to make it practical. I've been trying to give us some stuff that we can use. It's one thing to go back and read these ancient stories and understand what happened, but it's another thing to realize that there are messages embedded in these stories, and that we need to learn the lessons that are embedded in the stories. So let me share with you some type of failures so we can make this real. And maybe this is where you are at today. There's compromise, and that is returning to habitual sin, going back to the same sin over and over again. That you say, man, Lord, how can I keep failing in this area? Maybe it's trying to eat healthy, and you do good for a while, and then next thing you know, you're off the rail and you get discouraged because you compromised. You didn't stand fast. And now you are dealing with the guilt of that failure. Maybe it's complacency, and that's drifting instead of taking responsibility for your life. You find yourself wandering back into old habits, and you say to you, man, how am I back here again? How did I get back here again? Same old, same old. The beat down, day after day, because I've been complacent and I haven't been on guard, and I've just drifted back to some areas in my life that I didn't want to go. How about carelessness? Neglecting prayer and God's word. You know how important it is to be in the word of God. You know how important it is to pray. But yet you find yourself day after day allowing things to crowd out this time with God. And you fail to have that rich relationship with God. Maybe it's consumerism. The fact that you are dealing with debt in your life, that you worked hard to get out of debt, and now all of a sudden you find yourself back in debt again. And sometimes even deeper than you were. I know this has happened to me many times in my life where I've paid something off and started feeling good about my finances, and then all of a sudden you'll find myself back in debt again. You know, and sometimes it's necessary, but it just seems like that you failed. It seems, well, I'm just gonna say, it seems like I failed again. That I purposed that I wasn't gonna let this happen again, and I find myself back here. Maybe it's crushing stress, allowing pressure to dominate your life. That you are pressed in by deadlines, that you are pressed in by situations, that things overcome you and overwhelm you, and you find yourself under stress, that you said, I'm not going to let myself get to this place again. I'm not going to let myself get to this place where I'm under stress. But you find you there again, and now you're looking at your life as a failure. Man, how come I can't get control of this? How come I can't get the victory over this? Maybe it's careless speech. You said something that hurt another person. You said words that you regret saying. And now there's somebody out there that's wounded because of your careless speech. And you say, I'm going to watch my mouth. I think of the Psalm. I think of Psalm 141, where the psalmist said, set a watch over my mouth, oh Lord, keep the doors of my lips. But yet and still you end up saying something and you said, man, how in the world did I let that get out of my mouth? You failed again. And how about compromised commitments? You've made a promise to God. You made a promise even to yourself. You made a promise to others. And now you find yourself having broken those promises, having compromised those commitments. And here you are, dealing with failure once again. And so this is what we see here in Joshua chapter 7, that they were dealing with failure. And you have to deal with failure in your life. Now, I gave you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8, right? No, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've given you 7 things here. But maybe there's something else. As I say week after week, I just try to give you some things that I can think of. But maybe there's some other things that you are going through that has caused you to fail. And so you can write in what it is that you're dealing with. Now, if you look at the notes real quick, you'll see that there's 2 kinds of failure, and that is intentional failure and unintentional failure. And intentional failure is Achan, and he intentionally took the accursed things, those things that were accursed. He took them. That was intentional on his part. That was a direct result of something that he had done. But then there's unintentional failure. Joshua and all the rest of Israel, they were a part of it. They had to suffer the consequences, even though they didn't intentionally do it. And sometimes our failure results from our ignorance or poor judgment or immaturity or weakness. And although this failure is not deliberate, we still find ourselves dealing with it. So identifying the cause of failure. So I'm going to come back to this right here, because as we go through the lesson, I want you to say, what is it that's causing you to fail? I know just today, man, I was very frustrated about some things in my life, and just I had to look in the mirror, and I had to say, it's not my mother, it's not my father, but it's you. As I looked in the mirror, I said, it's you, it's me. Can't blame anybody else. Got to take responsibility. So you have to identify what is the cause of your failure. What is the cause of your failure? Now, there's a very interesting thing that I think we want to dig into just a second here, and that is, what was the accursed thing? Notice in chapter 7 and verse 1, but the children of Israel committed a trespass. And again, notice that he just didn't say Achan, but he said the children of Israel committed a trespass in the accursed thing. For Achan, the son of Camri, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah of the tribe of Judah, took the accursed thing. What was the accursed thing? What was it that he took? Oh, that might just be on yours. Okay, they always tell me that I'm in the black, but no. All right. Okay. Yeah, she was telling me I'm in the black. So hopefully, if I'm in the black, you can't see me, or my screen is in the black, then let her know so I can make that correction. All right. The accursed thing. What was the accursed thing? Right. And so it comes from the Hebrew word herim, and it's something that has been devoted or dedicated or set apart to God. And usually it was set apart for destruction. Once something was placed under herim, it no longer belonged to man, but it belonged to God. In the conquest of Jericho, God declared that this entire city was to be under ban, that the city and everything that was in it. So, what did Achan take? He took a beautiful Babylonian robe. He took 200 shekels of silver and a wedge or bar of gold weighing 50 shekels. This was a serious sin because it was the first city conquered. Watch this now. The first fruits always belong to God. Just like Israel gave God the first fruits of their crops, the first victory in Canaan belonged entirely to him. That everything, that's why God told him, don't take it. This is mine. Destroy it. This was harem. Destroy everything in it as an offering unto me. Some people might say, well, man, look at all the stuff that they had, all the things in there, man. They could have lived large and in charge for a long time. But God said, destroy it because it belongs to me. Now, notice this, that the rest of the land, the promise, God was given to them. He said, I'm giving you all the rest of it. Only offer up Jericho unto me. And how did they offer it up? By destroying everything in it. Don't keep anything for yourself. So Achan, what was he essentially saying? He said, God, I'm keeping for myself what belongs to you. I'm keeping for myself what belongs to you. So that was the accursed thing. The accursed thing was not necessarily the robe or the shekels of silver or the gold bar. That wasn't necessarily the accursed. They weren't individually accursed things. But the fact that they were to be destroyed, that made them, and Achan kept them, that made them the accursed thing. That's how they became accursed. So, as we think about that, that was why God came down with such a strict judgment on Achan and his family, because they took of the accursed thing. Now, in your notes, we have the snapshot focus. God desires that we identify the real causes of our failures. Do you identify the cause of your failure, or do you blame others? Do you identify the cause of your failure, or do you blame others? Let me go back real quick. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Can they hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on here, Saints. Some people said that I'm in the black, so uh I don't know. Uh so we'll roll on and hopefully you can still hear me as I am teaching. All right. Uh so as we look at the snapshot focus, God desires that we identify the real cause of our failures. And so we ask, do you identify uh, the cause of your failures or do you blame others? So again, when you fail, what is the cause of do you identify? Sometimes, and I'm just going to be honest with you, right? I'm just going to be honest with you. Sometimes if I don't get like my routine in the morning, I like to get up, spend time with the Lord, and then go to the gym. And some mornings I don't do it. And I just feel, you know, I feel terrible. I don't spend time with the Lord. I don't go work out. And sometimes I can go back to the night before and say that I didn't have a good night's sleep, that I was having a problem sleeping. And that was the cause of me not getting up, and that was the cause of me not spending time with the Lord and not going to gym. So I go back and I did. So I say, well, I got to correct that somehow. I got to make sure that I'm getting a good night's rest so that I can wake up and spend that time with the Lord and go work out. So you got to identify when you fail. You got to identify what is the cause of the failure. And so that's what Joshua did in chapter 7, that God revealed to them the cause of the failure. And the second thing is that we need to understand the results of the failure in verses 2 through 5. We need to understand the results of the failure. So failure can be devastating. Man, failure can be devastating. After the miraculous victory at Jericho, Israel looked at the small city of Ai and assumed that it would be an easy conquest. They were confident in their own assessment rather than seeking God's direction. The result was devastating. The result was devastating. 36 soldiers lost their lives. The army fled in panic. The hearts of the people melted and became as water. In a matter of moments, victory gave way to defeat. Courage turned into fear. Momentum came to a standstill, and the entire nation was gripped with discouragement. It was devastating. And all this because of one man's disobedience, and it had affected the whole camp. And so we see that when we understand the results of failure, that should be motivating to us to want to deal with our failure. Now, I know that some of you, maybe all of you, I'm not sure, might not be able to see my screen, but what I'm putting up now is the results of failure. What are the results of failure? So think about when you fail, right? When you fail, how do you feel? Okay. So I have up here fear. Your confidence is replaced with anxiety and uncertainty. Guilt. You got a heavy conscience, and you beat yourself up with guilt. Man, I did it again. I failed again. Shame. You feel embarrassed and unworthy. God, I can't even do this. Man, God, I can't even get this right. Right? Regret. Wishing that we could undo our choices. Wishing that we could do it all over again. hopelessness, believing things can never be made right, confusion, wondering why God allowed us to fail, loss of confidence, doubting ourselves and our abilities. And then even sometimes we can get to the point of grief where we are mourning the consequences of our actions. Just think, when you fail, you feel some kind of way. Whenever you fail, you feel some kind of way. And it may be one of the ways that I have up here, but notice Joshua and the people of Israel. Notice it says how they felt. And the men of Ai, in Joshua 7, verse 5, and the men of Ai smote them about 36 men, and they chased them from before the gate even unto Shebarim, and smote them in the going down. Wherefore, listen to this. Listen to this. The hearts of the people melted and became like water. Failure had an effect on them. And so likewise, failure has an effect on us. So the snapshot focus here is winners recognize that failure always produces consequences beyond themselves. When you face failure in your life, what have been the results? When you face failure in your life, think about the last time you failed at something. Now, again, when I say fail, I'm not necessarily talking, I mean, this could be a part of it, but I'm not necessarily talking like a test, where you fail the test, right? I mean, at some point, all of us have failed tests, or you failed, I'm just saying, in the little discouragements of life, when you fail in the little discouragements of life, how do you feel? I know when I don't get up and spend time with the Lord, and I don't go to the gym and work out, I know how I feel. I just feel, somehow I feel a little angry. I feel angry with come on, man, you got to do better than this, right? The beat up, I beat myself up. And so you got to learn how to deal with this failure, because as you learn how to deal with the failure, then you won't necessarily be dealing with the feelings that come with failure. So when you face failure in your life, what are the results? How do you feel? And again, I have a list of things that I put up here, but maybe you got something altogether different. So the results of failure, how do you feel when you fail? That leads me, and this will be the last thing that we cover today, because I'm gonna have to pick this lesson up next week. And that is, winners evaluate their failure. Oh man, this is good. I love this. I love this. Winners evaluate their failure. And that's found in Joshua 7, 6 through 10. Notice what it says here. Oh, I love it, man. I love it. I love it. Joshua chapter 7, verse 6. And Joshua tore his clothes and fell to the earth upon his face before the ark of the Lord until evening, he and the elders of Israel, and put dust on their heads. And Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over the Jordan, to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us? Would to God we had been content and dwelt on the other side of the Jordan. O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land shall hear of it, and shall surround us and cut off our name from the earth. And what wilt thou do unto the great, to thy great name? Evaluation. That he did an evaluation. And when you fail, you have to do an evaluation. Joshua's immediate response to Israel's defeat was not to blame the army, criticize the spies, or make excuses. Instead, he humbled himself before the Lord. He fell on his face. He tore his clothes. He put on dust on his head. He mourned and he prayed, seeking to understand why Israel had experienced such an unexpected defeat. Joshua recognized that before moving forward, he needed to hear from God. He needed to evaluate the situation. He needed to find out what was going on. And so the snapshot focus here is failure should always produce an evaluation. Oh, man, I can't stress this enough. I can't stress this enough. That failure should always produce an evaluation. We should ask, what can I learn from failure? And so what I want to do at this point, and then we'll wrap it up. And I'm sorry again that if my screen is in the black, I'll have to figure out how to correct that on my end. Hopefully, it's an easy fix. But what I want to talk about is, how do you learn from your failure? How do you learn? And we're going to use the letters learn in the word learn. 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 So the L stands for look back honestly. And this, you got to ask the question, what happened? Don't make excuses, or don't try to shift the blame on somebody else. You got to ask the question, what exactly happened here? What decision led to this? What part was my responsibility? And then you got to pray, and you got to say, Lord, help me to see the truth about my failure. Lord, help me to see the truth. Help me to learn as I deal with failure. So the L stands for look back honestly. The E stands for examine the cause. Why did this happen? You got to ask. And see, I'm preaching to myself now. I'm preaching to myself. Was I careless? Was I impatient? Was I prayerless? Did I ignore God's direction? I got to examine examine the cause. And think about this. Failure always has a root. Now, again, I did say earlier that sometimes, we might fail, as is the case with the children of Israel. They failed because of Achan's sin, right? But then God lumped them in the whole thing too. So they evidently had some kind of part, in it, where God held them accountable also, or maybe he was just trying to teach them a lesson. But the E, examine the cause. You got to learn from your failure. The A is accept responsibility. Accept responsibility. Own your part of the failure. Don't blame other people. Don't blame your circumstances. Don't even blame, even though we have a habit to do this quite a bit, the devil. Just say, Lord, I was wrong. Lord, this happened because of me. I remember when I first found out that I got diabetes. Never forget it. I had been doing some traveling and not exercising, eating terrible, man. I mean, I was eating at, because I was out all the time, eating at restaurants, and, just, it was terrible. And I came back and, went to my doctor, and my doctor told me that my sugar was up to almost 500, and said that you got diabetes. And I remember leaving the doctor's office, and I remember going back to my car, and I called my wife, and I was telling her, what what the deal was. And I remember saying to her specifically, I don't have anybody to blame for this but myself. Nobody to blame but myself. It's because I didn't take care of myself, right? So sometimes when we fail, we can't try to look for an excuse or a scapegoat. We gotta accept the responsibility ourselves. And I wrote a whole book on conquering the lion in the streets. And that whole book is about not making excuses. Not making excuses. But we got to find how to overcome our excuses. Because when we accept responsibility, then we're going to do something about it. But if I keep blaming other people, one of the things that I hear in the Black community often is that blaming other people for the situation and the circumstances. No, you take responsibility for yourself. And if you take responsibility for yourself, then you can make the changes necessary to do what you need to do. And even when you might be getting resistance intentionally, I believe that God will help you to deal with it when you take responsibility for your life. You can't let other people dictate how you live, and you can't let other people dictate, what you're going to do. You take responsibility for your life, and when you take responsibility, then that's when changes can be made. So you got to learn from your failure. The R stands to respond biblically, and that what does God want me to do? What does God want me to do? When you fail, you got to ask, what does God want me to do? Is there a sin I need to confess? Is there somebody I need to forgive? Is there apology I need to make? Is there a habit I need to change? Is there a relationship I need to restore? What is it that I need to do? God will tell you. As a matter of fact, as he said here, notice in verse 10, and we're gonna look at this a little bit more next week, but notice verse 10, and the Lord said unto Joshua, get up. Why are you lying down on your get up? And then God told him what to do. And so when we fail, we got to respond biblically. We got to know, God, what do you want me to do now? How do you want me to handle this? And that's what Joshua did. And he went to God, and God showed him exactly what it was that it's amazing. And we'll look at this next week, but it's amazing that God told him step by step what he wanted him to do. So don't simply sit around and regret that you failed, but you got to respond to it. And then I'll close with this, the N. And the N stands for next step forward. What is my next act of obedience? Failure should never leave you standing still. Oh. Wow. Failure should never leave you standing still. You should ask, what one thing can I do today? What lesson must I remember? How can this make me stronger? What is the next step? Joshua didn't stay on his face forever. Notice, God told him, get up. There's more battles to fight. Yeah, you got down on your face. You cried out. You evaluated the situation. But now it's time to get up and roll up your sleeves and let's take care of business. And so our lesson for today, which is part 1, winners respond to failure God's way. So I'm going to stop sharing and see.
I'll get some French fries.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, you know what?